Hello there, and welcome back to Crime Whispers Now. I know many of you use these videos to relax or even drift off to sleep. So before you get too comfortable, I thought it would be fun if everyone left a comment letting me know where you're listening from in the world, and if you're enjoying these cases, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's get cozy, take a deep breath, and begin story. 1 hour first case takes us to Happy Valley, a quiet, picturesque neighborhood in the southern part of Wan Chai district on Hong Kong Island. But while the name Happy Valley might evoke images of peace and charm, the story you're about to hear is anything but happy. The central figure in this tragedy is 16-year-old Pin Yu Ying, the sixth of 8 children in her family. They didn't actually live in Happy Valley. Their home was in Tai Tam Wan, on the eastern side of Hong Kong Island. Her parents ran a small fish shop nearby. While one of her older brothers was studying at the University of Hong Kong, Pin Yu Ying was a student at Sheyan Fa Middle School, the same school her younger brother, Pin Jingming, would later attend. But when her grades began to slip, she transferred to Ching Evening English College in Causeway Bay, for her 9th grade studies. Classes there ran late, from 7 o'clock p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m., and during the day she often helped her parents at the fish shop every evening. She would leave home at around 6 o'clock p.m., catching the tram to Causeway Bay and returning by 10 o'clock p.m. as Christmas approached. Her school was preparing for prom night, and Pin Yu Ying had agreed to rehearse a play with her classmates after class, meaning she'd be home even later than usual on Monday, December 16, 1974. Despite the cool weather, she dressed for her evening class and left home just before 5 o'clock p.m., an hour earlier than normal. At 6 o'clock p.m., she called her close friend, Chin Bingbing, a former classmate from Shina's school. The two had remained inseparable, still going to movies and shopping together whenever they could that evening. Yu Ying asked Bingbing to return a pop music cassette tape she had borrowed earlier. They agreed to meet at the Happy Valley tram station in half an hour. Bingbing lived on Sing Kwong Road, only a short walk from the station, so at 6:30 p.m. she arrived with the cassette in hand, but Pin Yu Ying was nowhere to be found. Bingbing waited, scanning the small crowd and checking the time. By 7 o'clock p.m., her friends still hadn't shown up, since Yu Ying had been known to cancel plans without warning. Bingbing eventually shrugged it off and returned home that night. Parents worked late at the fish shop as usual, but when they finally came home, they were unsettled to find her room empty, thinking she might still be at school for the play rehearsal. They phoned her classmates only to learn something disturbing. Yu Ying had never arrived at school at all. She hadn't attended class, nor had she been seen at the rehearsal. No one knew where she was the next morning. As the city stirred awake, a sanitation worker began his daily cleaning route around the Happy Valley tram station on Wang Nai Chung Road. The area was ringed with tall buildings and bustling shops, and his job was to make sure the streets were spotless before the businesses opened. But as he reached the front of the sanitation worker continued sweeping outside the veterinary clinic at 212 to 213 Wang Nai Chung Road. Something unusual caught his attention. Sitting directly in front of the entrance was a large cardboard box, tied neatly with rope. It was about 35 inches long and 24 inches wide, far too big to be an ordinary delivery. Someone had forgotten. He gave it a small shove, but it didn't budge, thinking it might belong to the clinic. He moved on with his cleaning. By just after 8 o'clock a.m., an employee arrived to open the clinic for the day. He too noticed the box, but since it wasn't theirs and was blocking the doorway, it was already becoming a nuisance. He tried to move it himself, only to find it far too heavy, calling for a colleague. The two men struggled together to lift it, eventually placing it off to the side of the road, just a short distance away. 2 hours later, a patrolling police officer walked along Wang Nai Chung Road. As he approached the front of the veterinary clinic, his eyes fell on the same box, now sitting awkwardly on the pavement, partially obstructing pedestrians. Curious, he asked nearby shop owners and passers-by, If it belonged to anyone, nobody claimed it, pulling a pair of scissors from his kit. The officer carefully cut through the rope, the flaps of the box creaked open, and inside was a sight he would never forget. It was the naked body of a young woman, curled tightly in on herself, her knees drawn to her chest. She had been wrapped in old newspapers, and there were no clothes or personal belongings inside with hers. Shocked, the officer grabbed his radio and called it in to the command center. Morning rush hour traffic brought dozens of curious onlookers, who began to gather despite officers' attempts to keep them back within minutes. Additional police units arrived, cordoning off the area, with tape forensic specialists moved in to examine the grisly discovery on the victim's body. They found traces of copper fragments, a small piece of red adhesive tape stuck in her hair, and specks of paint clinging to her elbows. A tiny scrap of white paper was stuck to her skin, bearing two faint words. Investigators speculated it could have come from an electrical appliance repair shop, possibly a clue to her whereabouts before death. Under her fingernails, they discovered tiny fabric fibers, perhaps from the perpetrator's clothing. The box itself had once contained a Hitachi television, measuring 35 inches long, 24 inches wide, and 24 inches high. Several fingerprints were lifted from its surface, but each was eventually traced back to individuals with no connection to the crime. The autopsy report was grim. The victim bore numerous bruises, suggesting she had been beaten and possibly tortured before she died. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but her breasts had been removed after death, and her pubic hair had been deliberately burned based on food remnants in her stomach. She had eaten within 3 hours of her death. The forensic timeline suggested she was placed inside the box roughly 12 hours after dying. Cause of death: asphyxiation, the result of manual strangulation, with the killer's right hand estimated. Time of death: sometime between 6:00 p.m. on December 16th and the early hours of the 17th. The police compared the victim to all recent missing persons reports, but found no matches. Desperate for leads, they released photographs and details to the media, urging the public to come forward. Pin Yu-ying's family had been frantically searching for her. Then, by chance, they opened the morning paper and saw the story: the girl in the box. And staring back at them from the printed photograph was a face they recognized. The resemblance was undeniable. The moment Pin Yu-ying's family saw the grainy newspaper photo of the girl in the box, their hearts sank. They feared the worst. 2 days after her disappearance, they went to the police station for the formal identification. It didn't take long. The victim found in the cardboard box was indeed 16-year-old Pin Yu-ying, with her identity confirmed. The Hong Kong police wasted no time. A special task force was assembled, led by one of the city's most recognizable detectives, a man well known for his bald head and unflinching demeanor. Their first step: trace every movement Yu had made in the hours before her death. Investigators began by speaking with her younger brother, Pin Jingming, who had been the last family member to see her alive, and her close friend, Qin Bingbing, who had arranged to meet her. That night, Jingming recalled that on the day she vanished, he had returned home early. After finishing his exams, his sister had already prepared lunch, and they ate together around 4:00 p.m. Not long after, she received a phone call. Roughly 7 minutes later, there was a second call, each lasting only 2 to 3 minutes. After hanging up, Yu Yang told him she needed to stop by a newspaper office in North Point before heading to her evening class. She said she was helping their older brother place an advertisement, and that she'd be leaving the house at 5:00 p.m. instead of her usual 6:00. But when police checked with the newspaper office, they found no record of such a request. In fact, the office had closed at exactly 5:00 p.m., just as Yu Ying would have been leaving home. Qin Bingbing's account was equally puzzling. She had known Yu Ying for 4 years, ever since they attended Shina school together. Despite transferring 2 different schools, they had stayed close, often going shopping or to the cinema. About 6 months earlier, while out together, Yu Ying had bought a pop music cassette, which Bingbing had borrowed on the afternoon of the 16th. Yu Ying called and asked her to return it. They agreed to meet at the Happy Valley tram Station at 6:30 p. Bing Bing arrived on time, cassette in hand, but Yu Ying never showed by 7 o'clock p.m. She gave up and went home. She explained to police that this wasn't unusual. Yu Ying had failed to turn up for pre-arranged meetings 4 or 5 times before, often canceling without warning, so Bing Bing hadn't thought much of it at the time. However, one detail stood out during their phone call. There had been loud background noise, and Yu Ying's voice sounded hurried, almost anxious, sensing she was in a rush. Bing Bing had grabbed the tape and headed out quickly, never imagining it would be the last time she heard from her friend. Police next visited Ching Evening English College in Causeway Bay, where Yu Ying was enrolled. They asked her teacher for the attendance record from that night, only to be told it had gone missing. The teacher explained that when Yu's family first came to the school to ask about her, he had checked the list and confirmed she hadn't attended class. He'd set the sheet aside, but when he went to retrieve it later, it had vanished. Yu Ying's classmates described her as bright, cheerful, and full of energy. She had a weakness for ice cream, a love for acting, and was preparing for a Christmas stage performance. She'd never missed a single rehearsal, except for the night she disappeared. She was also known to have little interest in boys, partly because of her strict parents. Still, there was one exception, a fellow student from Taiwan who had shown interest in her. She rejected him, and, in response, he began spreading false rumors, including a particularly damaging claim that her family was linked to organized crime. Some students had believed it and started to avoid her. Her older sister had even confronted the boy at school. Police considered him a potential suspect and launched a search for him, but after the murder, he seemed to vanish. When they finally located him, he provided an alibi that cleared him of any involvement. It was a crushing setback. The investigators had believed this lead might crack the case, and now it was gone. Attention then shifted to the cardboard box itself. It had once been used to package a Hitachi 17-inch TV, model S67B, a product sold exclusively in Hong Kong. For the past 2 years, the only authorized distributor was a dealer on Kesu Road in Kowloon. The company's manager told police that in the past 3 months, they had sold 300 units of this exact model. However, the company did not sell. The distributor explained that they did not sell directly to customers. Instead, sales of the Hitachi 17-inch S67B were handled through 72 second-tier dealers scattered across Hong Kong. This made tracking the origin of the cardboard box an enormous challenge. Still, investigators tried. They tracked down hundreds of recent buyers, asking each one what had happened to their original TV packaging. Not a single person admitted to discarding a box anywhere near. Wang Nai-chung rode the head of the task force. The bald-headed inspector began to reconsider the box itself. It was designed to carry a television set, yet it had been used to transport a human body, which would have made it extremely heavy if one person tried to carry it. The weight would likely crush or deform the box, but this one was in relatively good condition, tied with rope at the bottom for extra support, with faint drag marks along one side. To test his theory, the inspector staged a reconstruction. A female officer with a build similar to Pin Yu Ying's curled into the same position inside a duplicate box. The results were clear, with a person inside. It was far too heavy for one person to carry any significant distance. To people could lift it, but the pressure would bend and damage the box, making long-distance transport impractical. So how had the killer managed it? Police studied 50 popular car models on the market at the time. Not a single one, not even the largest sedans, had a boot or rear seat area large enough to fit the 17-inch TV carton. That left a truck as the only possibility, but a truck in Happy Valley, a tightly packed residential and commercial area, would draw attention, and no witnesses had reported seeing one on the night of December 16th. Inspector began to think differently. Perhaps the box had never been brought in from far away. Perhaps the crime scene was not somewhere else at all, but right there, in Happy Valley. This theory fit with another finding: traces of copper fragments on Yu Ying's body. Investigators launched a sweep of every factory and electrical repair shop in the area, interviewing nearly 750 electricians, but again, Nothing suspicious emerged by late December. Almost 3 weeks after the murder, the case seemed to be losing momentum then. During a routine canvass, a patrol officer made an observation that would reignite the investigation. He spotted an ice cream shop on Wang Naicheng Road, just steps away from the veterinary clinic where the box had been found. It was called Yin Mei Ice Cream, and upstairs, in its attic, he noticed piles of technical equipment and stacked cardboard boxes. The space looked more like a small repair workshop than storage. Details struck him immediately. A classmate had told police that Yu Ying loved ice cream. Could she have stopped here the night she vanished? The officer reported his suspicion to his superiors, and 2 weeks after the murder, police obtained a warrant to search the shop. Yin Mei Ice Cream was divided into 3 sections: the front counter for serving customers, a back room where vending machines were repaired, and the attic, crammed with tools and miscellaneous items. A phone line was also installed up there inside the attic. Police found an assortment of objects: copper wiring, rolls of red adhesive, tape, paint, stacks of newspapers, cardboard boxes, and a welding machine. Every single one of these items matched details from the forensic examination of Ewing's body. The shop manager explained that the materials were used to repair vending machines. The newspapers were bought for staff to read and then bundled for recycling. The boxes upstairs were all small, he insisted, none large enough to hold a TVHE. Also provided the shift schedule for the night of December 16th. Only one employee had been working, a man named Ouyang Pingkong. When police entered the shop, Ouyang had seemed nervous from the start, his jaw tightening, facial muscles twitching as they moved through the attic. Officers exchanged glances. This behavior was worth noting the next day. They brought Ouyang in for questioning. The interrogation was brutal. Police beat him and even forced soda into his nose. But he insisted he had never met Pin Yuying and had nothing to do with her murder, lacking solid evidence. Investigators were forced to release him. Meanwhile, the forensics team examined the forensic analysis of evidence taken from the ice cream shop, revealed that the copper fragments, paint, and red adhesive tape matched those found on the victim's body. The newspaper discovered in the shop was identical to the issue used to wrap the body. A small white slip of paper reading "repaired," found in the attic, was consistent with the damaged note found on the victim's elbow. A search of Ouyang Pingkong's home turned up 3 suits. Testing confirmed that the fabric fibers under Pin Yuying's fingernails matched one of his suits. Additionally, 2 green wool fibers of unknown origin found on his suit were identical to fibers located on the victim's body. Based on this mounting evidence, police reconstructed the likely sequence of events on the afternoon of the murder. Pin Yuying left home to help her brother place a classified ad at a newspaper office in North Point. When she arrived, she discovered the office was closed and began walking toward her evening classes with extra time to spare. She wandered through the streets. Upon reaching Wang Naicheng Road, she spotted the Yin Mei ice cream shop. Fond of ice cream, she stepped inside after making her purchase. She recalled that her close friend Qin Bingbing lived nearby that evening. Ouyang Pingkong was working alone in the shop when Yu Ying asked if she could use a phone. He led her upstairs to the attic. The call she made to her friend came from that location with no other customers present. Ouyang developed malicious intent when Yu Ying resisted his advances and tried to flee. He strangled her from behind with his right hand. The force proved fatal, needing to continue his shift. Ouyang hid the body in the attic and returned to serve customers after closing. He locked the shop, returned upstairs, undressed the body, burned the victim's pubic hair with a heated object, and removed her breasts, likely to mislead investigators into thinking the killer was a sadist or mentally ill. He then located a large cardboard television box nearby and placed the body inside. Because the box was too heavy to carry without damaging it, he decided to leave it just outside the neighboring veterinary clinic, reasoning that hiding it in plain sight would draw no suspicion. Initially, the ploy worked. Despite this, the trail of evidence ultimately led back to him. Ouyang Pingkong, 28, lived in San Pokong, Hong Kong by day. He worked as an office clerk at a factory on Wanggong Road, orphaned and struggling financially. He had married Jian Fong in 1972. After a year of dating, the marriage was stable, and they had one daughter. At the time of the crime, his wife was pregnant with their second child. To support his growing family, Oh Young took on part-time evening work at the In May ice cream shop. Several months before the murder, the shop allowed employees one day off each week, but he often worked through his rest days to earn more. His daily routine involved leaving the factory at 5 p.m., arriving at the ice cream shop by 5:40 p.m., and working until 10 p.m., though he often stayed until 11 p.m. His wife confirmed that on the night of the murder, he returned home at his usual time and showed no unusual behavior. Neighbors described him as polite and soft-spoken. However, the shop's time records showed that on the day of the crime, he worked from 5:40 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. The store could only be accessed through 3 doors: a metal roll gate, a narrow side door, and a wooden interior door, and only 3 people, including Oh Young, held keys to all 3 on January 3, 1975. 3 months after the murder, police formally arrested Oh Young Ping Kong for the killing of Pin Yu Ying. 6 months later, his trial began at the Hong Kong High Court. The trial of Oh Young Ping Kong was heard before a jury of 5 men and 2 women. Throughout the proceedings, Oh Young maintained his innocence and denied all charges. The prosecution presented more than 200 pieces of evidence, arguing that the location of the May ice cream shop right next to the veterinary clinic, where the cardboard box containing the victim was found, gave the perpetrator both opportunity and convenience to commit the crime and dispose of the body. Key forensic links were presented. Fibers found under victim Ping Yu Ying's nails matched those from Oh Young's suit. Identical green wool fibers were discovered both on the victim's body and in Oh Young's possession, and the copper fragments, paint particles, and scraps of paper on the victim matched materials in the attic of the ice cream shop. Timekeeping records showed Oh Young was the only person working at the shop that evening, and he had keys to all 3 doors, giving him unrestricted access. Police demonstrations using mannequins illustrated how the killer could have strangled the victim from behind, placed her body into a cardboard box, and dragged it to the disposal site. 15 witnesses were called, including a 19-year-old woman who testified that Oh Young had twice burned her dress with a cigarette butt. Behavior psychologists described as sexually deviant. The prosecution connected this to the fact that the victim's pubic hair had been burned. The defense argued that Oh Young had no motive. He was happily married, had a steady job, and did not know the victim. They highlighted that out of 269 fibers found on the victim, only 7 matched Oh Young's suit, and questioned the change in the estimated time of death from 9 o'clock p.m. midnight to 6 o'clock p.m. midnight, suggesting it was altered to fit Oh Young's schedule. They also noted that no fingerprints on the cardboard box matched the accused, and that the disappearance of the class attendance sheet and 2 mysterious phone calls to the victim before she went missing were never fully investigated. Oh Young denied the victim had ever visited the shop that day, insisted customers were not allowed to use the shop's phone, and claimed the attic was rarely used by him. He maintained that his workload left no time to retrieve a cardboard box or dispose of a body. After 18 days of trial, the jury found Oh Young guilty of murder, and the court sentenced him to death. The case became notable as the first in Hong Kong to be solved using scientific forensic evidence. After sentencing, Oh Young insisted on his innocence, staging a hunger strike in prison. His wife Jane Jean Fong also believed him and sought legal assistance. Prominent lawyer Lin Tower filed an appeal in March 1976, and the Court of Appeal overturned the conviction, ordering a retrial. 2 months later, a new trial began with a jury of 7 men and 2 women. This time, Oh Young was represented by renowned lawyer Wu Hanlong. However, the verdict remained unchanged: guilty of murder, and Oh Young was once again sentenced to death. Appeals to both the Court of Appeal and the Privy Council in the UK failed in 1977. More than 2 years after the murder, the governor of Hong Kong granted clemency, commuting the death sentence to life imprisonment by 1981. Oh Young had served 6 years, during which he was considered a model prisoner, even teaching Braille to blind inmates. However, multiple requests for clemency were denied, as authorities argued that Oh Young had shown no genuine remorse. In truth, Oh Young was not without regret. He simply maintained that he had not killed Pin Ya-ying. That same year, Zhang Jinfang filed for divorce. Taking their daughter with her mother and child, began a new life together, relying solely on each other for support. In 1990, 16 years after the murder, Oh Young finally admitted to killing Pin Ya-ying, recounting the details of the crime. But in 2002, 28 years after the incident, he was granted clemency and released from prison. After his release, Oh Young told reporters that he was, in fact, innocent. He claimed his prison confession had been made under duress, insisting it was the only way to convince others that he had repented, thereby increasing his chance of release. Regarding the body in the cardboard box case in Happy Valley, some argued Oh Young had no clear motive, no eyewitnesses tied him to the scene, and no fingerprints placed him at the crime. They believed the evidence was too weak to secure a fair conviction, and suggested it was entirely possible he had been wrongfully imprisoned. Others countered that, while no single piece of evidence was conclusive, the accumulation of circumstantial proof created a near airtight case, one, they believed, pointed firmly to his guilt. After nearly 35 years behind bars, Oh Young Ping Kung changed his name and quietly began a new life. Whether he was truly guilty remains a question only he can answer. The case officially closed, yet unresolved mysteries lingered, leaving Hong Kong gripped by a mixture of shock and unease. Some believe that somewhere in a quiet corner of the city, the spirit of the young schoolgirl still wanders, waiting for answers and for peace. Story 2. On November 22, 1999, the Pinole Police Department in San Francisco, California, received an emergency call from 28-year-old Raymond Wong, a Chinese-American man, reporting his girlfriend missing. The missing woman was Alice Sinha's live-in partner and the mother of their infant son, who was not yet a year old. According to Raymond, Alice had followed her usual routine the day before, driving the family's Toyota to her community college classes, but she never returned. The timing made her disappearance even more distressing. Thanksgiving, a time for family reunions, was just 2 days away. Investigators moved quickly, interviewing Alice's parents and close friends. No one knew where she was. One friend mentioned that Alice adored her son, and with his first birthday approaching in just a few days, it was unimaginable that she would miss such a milestone, unless something terrible had happened. The concern deepened when Alice's parents revealed she was 4 months pregnant. Police plastered missing person flyers across the community. A breakthrough came on November 24th. They learned that on November 21, the day she vanished, Alice had visited a bakery in a local shopping mall to order her son's birthday cake. Acting on this lead, investigators rushed to the mall, where they located her Toyota still parked in the lot. A thorough search of the car and a review of the surrounding security footage revealed nothing suspicious. Believing Alice may have been abducted, police decided to speak with Raymond directly. When they arrived at his apartment and rang the bell, the door was answered by another woman, Jessica Temps. She was visibly affectionate with Raymond in the investigators' presence, raising immediate suspicion. How could he be living with another woman just 3 days after his girlfriend's disappearance? When questioned, Raymond was surprisingly candid. He explained that Jessica was also his girlfriend and that Alice had known about their relationship. In fact, he claimed the three of them had been involved in a long-term polyamorous arrangement, openly aware of each other's roles, and allegedly living together in harmony. The situation became even more bizarre when Raymond revealed that both women had borne his children, Jessica having recently given birth to a daughter. He described the arrangement as a mutually fulfilling relationship in which both women cared for him, their children, and one another without conflict. He further explained that after Alice disappeared, Jessica had taken it upon herself to comfort him and help care for their son, although Alice had a young son and, on the surface, appeared to live a peaceful life. Investigators suspected there was far more beneath the facade, acting on instinct. They conducted a meticulous search of her apartment in the garage. They made a troubling discovery: a trash bag stuffed with Alice's clothing. Stranger still, her entire wardrobe had been cleared from the bedroom. These signs only deepened police suspicions that her partner, Raymond, was deliberately hiding the truth about her disappearance. When investigators suggested a lie detector test, Raymond surprised them by agreeing immediately, but when the results came back, he failed still. Detectives knew the polygraph was merely a supporting tool, not admissible as sole evidence. For an arrest, they needed something far more concrete before they could move forward. Weeks passed without a breakthrough. Then, on the morning of January 24, 2000, fate intervened in the barren desert east of Reno, Nevada. Two mining workers were making their usual patrol when they froze in horror. Protruding from the sand was something pale and ghastly, the remains of a human body. Shocked, they called police at once. Responding officers found a scene of disturbing brutality. The body, badly decomposed by the harsh desert climate, was identified as female, but the face was unrecognizable. The scalp was missing. The remains were severely damaged, and entire portions of the torso, including the right breast, uterus, and bladder, had been removed. If this was the work of a human, the cruelty was beyond comprehension. Animal activity complicated matters. Forensic examination revealed claw and bite marks, and the body's position, legs spread, feet pointing toward a nearby cave, suggested scavengers. That cave was later confirmed to be a coyote den, leading police to suspect the missing body parts had been consumed by wildlife. But that theory quickly unraveled. Investigators found multiple gunshot wounds on the remains, and several shell casings scattered. Nearby, this was clearly a homicide, and the location appeared to be the primary crime scene. Among the victims' tattered clothing, police noticed an unusual clue: a small collection of arcade tokens stamped with the letters NWO and ZOG. At first, the meaning was unclear. Later, research revealed them as acronyms for New World Order and Zionist-occupied government, phrases often linked to white supremacist groups. Immediate priority was identification based on the advanced decomposition. Forensic experts estimated the woman had been dead anywhere from several weeks to a few months. Cross-checking DNA and dental records against missing persons reports, police made a grim confirmation. The body was that of Alice Sin. Missing for 2 months, her remains had been found roughly 300 kilometers from her home, raising the question: why had she been taken to such a remote location, and what chain of events had led to such a vicious death? Detectives believed the planning and effort involved transporting her to the desert, executing the killing, and mutilating the body pointed too deep. Personal malice. The arcade tokens hinted at a possible racial motive. Alice had lived in Pinole, a small East Bay city in California's Contra Costa County. Despite its modest size, just 13.8 square miles, it had a diverse population, with a significant Asian American community alongside its white residents. In a state where anti-Asian hate crimes were a serious and growing problem, the possibility of a racially motivated murder could not be ignored. Still, seasoned investigators considered another possibility: that the racist overtones were deliberately planted to mislead the investigation. The autopsy revealed the final horror. Alice had been shot 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the temple, and once in the center of the forehead. Alice's face had been doused with sulfuric acid, and, most shockingly, her uterus had been deliberately removed. This last, chilling detail suggested the killer might have been trying to destroy evidence of her pregnancy. So, who was the most likely to have committed such a crime? Investigators quickly zeroed in on Raymond, a man who had been on their radar since their very first interview with him. To get to the truth, they dug deeper into his past, and into his complicated history with Alice. Alice was born in China, and when she was just 3 years old, her family immigrated to the United States. Settling in San Francisco, she was the pride of her parents, excelling academically and displaying a remarkable dedication to her studies. Her talent and perseverance paid off when she earned admission to the University of California, Davis, one of the nation's top public universities. Her parents believed she had a brilliant future ahead, but during her freshman year, a romantic encounter would change the course of her life. At first, Alice dated a fellow student named Tom. Their relationship was simple, pure, and filled with the joys of youth, the kind of college romance where the couple seemed inseparable. But one night, at a party Tom took her to, Alice met a man who would alter everything. Raymond Wong, a 26-year-old technology consultant. Raymond was an immigrant from Hong Kong, while Alice had come from China. Their shared experiences of adapting to life in a new country formed an immediate connection for a young freshman. The image of a successful tech entrepreneur like Raymond was magnetic. It wasn't long before Alice ended things with Tom and fell into a passionate romance with Raymond. Their relationship had barely begun when life threw them an unexpected turn. Alice found out she was pregnant. The news was like an earthquake, shaking the foundation of their fiery passion. Now, she faced a life-changing decision: continue pursuing her promising academic future, or embrace motherhood at a very young age. After days of inner turmoil, Alice chose to keep the baby. Her decision was rooted in her deep feelings for Raymond, and in her inability to give up the life growing inside her. She put her college dreams on hold, a choice that saddened her parents, but one they respected. They gave her their blessing, believing that motherhood was a sacred journey. Alice moved in with Raymond and began a new chapter when the baby was born. She embraced her role wholeheartedly, juggling daytime childcare with night classes. Despite the challenges, she felt her life was full. Raymond, too, seemed to rise to the occasion, providing for the family and making successful investments. On the surface, they appeared to be a picture-perfect household, but beneath that facade lay unanswered questions, especially about when Raymond's so-called polyamorous relationship began, and why Alice would agree to such a compromise. The answers came in the form of recovered emails from Alice's account, and they told a very different story from Raymond's. He had claimed that Alice and another woman, Jessica, lived in harmony as equal partners. In reality, the two women were bitter rivals, exchanging venomous messages and insisting that each was Raymond's true loved one. Email from Alice to Raymond was particularly heartbreaking, written during her pregnancy. It revealed that Raymond had rekindled his relationship with Jessica at the very time Alice needed him most in it. Alice pleaded with him to admit his mistake and return to her so they could raise their child together. Her words were full of hope, but what followed shattered those hopes completely. Investigators then uncovered another startling piece of information. Alice had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy, naming Raymond as the sole beneficiary. Combined with the emotional turmoil between the three, this made him the prime suspect. The moment Alice's body was found, police tried to locate Raymond, but they were too late. He and Jessica had already fled to Canada without leaving any indication of their return. When investigators searched Raymond's home under a warrant, they made a disturbing discovery. Every trace of Alice's existence had been erased. In her place were Jessica's belongings, as though she had quickly moved in and assumed Alice's role. The most damning evidence came from Raymond's own computer. Forensic experts uncovered investigators were able to recover deleted files from Raymond's devices, uncovering a horrifying cache: thousands of hours of snuff films, a disturbing genre depicting real-life killings. Many of the victims in these videos were women who had been tortured, assaulted, and brutally murdered, reflecting the deeply twisted mindset of the collection's owner. Even more damning were the emails exchanged between Raymond and Jessica. In them, Raymond assured Jessica that she no longer needed to harass or threaten Alice because he would take care of her. He urged Jessica to be patient, as though hinting at a calculated, premeditated plan. By this point, police were almost certain of Raymond's involvement until an unexpected twist disrupted the investigation. Media outlets in San Francisco received an email from the Aryan Brotherhood, a notorious white supremacist gang, claiming responsibility for Alice's murder. At first, the statement caused confusion, but detectives quickly suspected something was off. Technical experts traced the origin of the email to an internet cafe in Calgary, Canada, the same city where Raymond and Jessica had fled. Further checks confirmed Raymond had indeed visited that very cafe. While this reinforced suspicions, it still wasn't the definitive proof needed to charge him with murder. The case took another turn when Raymond and Jessica unexpectedly returned to the U.S. Fresh from registering their marriage in Calgary, they seemed almost celebratory, as if Alice's death weighed nothing on their conscience. Raymond was immediately taken in for questioning, but he continued to vehemently deny killing Alice. When confronted about the incriminating emails, he brushed them off as mere attempts to calm Jessica's fragile state of mind, despite mounting circumstantial evidence. Investigators still lacked the final piece to link him directly to the murder. In the meantime, while combing through Raymond's computer, police uncovered illegal material involving minors, dated back to 2002, unable to charge him for Alice's death. Prosecutors took him to trial for the possession charge. Raymond offered no resistance and received a 2-year prison sentence. After serving his time, he resumed life seemingly unfazed, while Alice's murder remained unsolved. But in 2009, his arrogance landed him in trouble again as a convicted sex offender. Raymond was legally required to register annually with authorities, a step he failed to take. Instead of facing the violation, he posted a $100,000 bail and fled the country. He hid in China for 3.5 years, staying one step ahead of law enforcement despite exhaustive international efforts. Investigators found no trace of him until fate intervened. December 19, 2011. The lead investigator on Alice's case at the Pinal Police Department received a call from the FBI. Raymond had been detained at San Francisco International Airport, caught attempting to enter the country using a fake passport. The news nearly made the officer leap from his seat. Raymond's decision to return stemmed from his desire to visit his ailing father. Knowing he couldn't travel under his real identity, he devised an audacious scheme impersonating an international intelligence operative. Incredibly, he even contacted the CIA and FBI offices in Beijing to lend credibility to his disguise. But his plan collapsed when immigration officials detected the fraud, arresting him on the spot. For investigators, this was a golden opportunity. They knew if they couldn't secure decisive evidence now, Raymond might once again slip beyond the reach of the law. The weight of the moment bore heavily on the investigation team. They knew this was a rare, fleeting chance. One they could not afford to waste. Their renewed strategy focused on a single, crucial figure, Jessica Tang, the woman who might hold the final key to Alice's murder. The lead investigator admitted this was the greatest challenge of his career. How could they persuade Jessica to break her silence after 12 long years, years in which memories could fade and physical evidence had nearly vanished? During her initial interrogation, Jessica showed visible signs of stress, but her confidence was telling. She knew the police still lacked the decisive proof to convict Raymond. She tried to distance herself, insisting she'd severed all contact with him and wanted nothing to do with his troubles. But the detectives pressed on with relentless persistence. Over days of careful questioning and psychological pressure, they began to break through her defenses. They confronted her with a chilling truth. As the sole keeper of the real story, Jessica herself could be in grave danger. If Raymond suspected she might reveal the truth, he could silence her with the terrifying possibility of becoming his next victim. Jessica's resolve crumbled, her voice shook, her composure shattered, and she began to speak. She described the day everything changed. November 21st, 1999, Raymond had driven her and Alice deep into the barren desert of Churchill County, Nevada. He told Alice that the purpose of the trip was to kill Jessica. In reality, this was an elaborate deception. The true target was Alice herself. Jessica recalled sitting in the back seat, watching the heated argument between Raymond and Alice escalate as they drove. Eventually, the car stopped in a remote stretch far from any main road. Raymond told Jessica to stay inside while he took Alice out to talk. Minutes later, the desert's silence was shattered by gunshots. Jessica looked out and saw Alice collapsed, but the nightmare didn't end there. Raymond returned to the car, dragged Jessica out, and thrust the gun into her hands. "You have to do it too," he ordered, trapped, terrified, and convinced her own life was on the line. Jessica turned her head away and fired blindly. Raymond then sent her back to the car, alone with Alice's body. He committed acts so depraved and brutal that Jessica could hardly speak of them to mislead investigators. He scattered game tokens, engraved with white supremacist symbols, around the scene, trying to stage the murder as a hate crime. With Jessica's detailed confession, police finally had the grounds they needed to arrest Raymond for first-degree murder. The investigation uncovered more corroborating evidence, including a witness from a rest stop the group had visited on the way to the desert on May 27, 2015. 15 years after Alice's death, justice was finally delivered. The jury found Raymond guilty and sentenced him to 50 years to life in prison, ensuring he would never harm another woman. Jessica, who admitted her role as an accomplice, received 5 years of probation due to her severe heart condition. In 2018, Raymond tried to appeal, but the court swiftly rejected his request. The man who once evaded justice for over a decade would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Reflecting on the case, the local prosecutor mourned the loss of Alice, a 21-year-old mother and devoted daughter who had deserved a bright future. If only she had taken the scholarship to a top university, they said. If only she had walked away after discovering her boyfriend's betrayal, she might have avoided that fatal journey into the desert. The victims in this case were the wife and young daughter of Su Guo, who had been secretly involved in an extramarital affair with a woman named Yang Ya. Yang Ya was born and raised in an ordinary family in Shanghai. Her parents, both factory workers, placed great value on education and worked hard to support her academic ambitions. Despite their modest income, through determination and long hours of study, Yang earned admission to a local teacher's college. Upon graduation, she began working at an elementary school close to her home. As a teacher, Yang was dedicated and respected. Though she remained reserved and introverted, she rarely confided in others, even her own parents. Due to generational and emotional distance, this isolation often left her feeling lonely, but she never allowed it to interfere with her professional responsibilities. Over time, her career flourished, and she became well-liked by both students and colleagues. Not long after, Yang met Zhang Mo, the first man to capture her heart, gentle and attentive. Zhang quickly swept her into the heady rush of first love. The relationship deepened, and the two even discussed marriage. Yang envisioned a warm, stable home and a happy future with him, but her dream was abruptly shattered when, without warning, Zhang broke off their relationship. The breakup came as a devastating shock. Yang could not understand why he had abandoned her after such intimacy and shared plans with no one to turn to. Her heartbreak slowly twisted into resentment. After repeated, failed attempts to win him back, Yang acted out in anger, setting fire to electrical appliances in his home. A final act that severed all ties. Outwardly, she seemed to regain her composure, but inwardly, her emotional state had grown darker and more unstable. In 1991, Yang met Li Chunying during a school event. Li was educated, articulate, and carried himself with quiet confidence. Yang was drawn to his polite and cultured manner, and the two eventually married. But married life was far from the romantic vision she had imagined. They quarreled frequently over minor issues, and even after the birth of their child, tensions persisted. Both her past and present relationships had left Yang feeling dissatisfied and powerless. Then, in January 1996, fate brought her face to face with her old neighbor, Su Guo, nearly 40 years old. Yang still maintained a graceful appearance that caught Su's attention, although Su was already married. He found himself drawn to her refined demeanor and soft-spoken charm, learning that Yang's marriage was troubled. Su began to hint at a more intimate connection one evening. Su invited Yang to go dancing. Both drank heavily, and in the haze of intoxication, they crossed the line that night. Su took Yang back to his home, while his wife Guo and their 8-year-old daughter, Su Legend, were away visiting family. From that point forward, their secret relationship deepened. Su was mature and steady, willing to tolerate Yang's stubborn streak. His warmth and attentiveness reignited feelings she had long suppressed. Compared to the cold, distant attitude of her husband, Su seemed to truly understand her. In time, Yang fell deeply in love with him and began to imagine a shared future together. Eventually, she told Su she wanted to divorce her husband so they could be together. She expected him to be overjoyed. After all, he had always appeared so devoted during their meetings, but instead, his reaction was one of alarm. Su made it clear that he had no intention of leaving his family, though he no longer felt strong affection for his wife. He valued the life they had built and could not bear to abandon his young daughter. He also began to notice troubling aspects of Yang's personality over the months. She had repeatedly expressed bitter, even malicious, resentment toward her former lover and her husband to Su. These outbursts revealed a darker, more volatile side. Beneath her composed exterior, it was enough to convince him that ending the affair was the best course of action. After Yang expressed her desire to live with Shu Guo, he hesitated and refused. It became painfully clear to her that Shu was only drawn to the thrill of their illicit encounters. He did not truly love her, nor did he intend to make a long-term commitment. This rejection, piled atop her past emotional wounds, pushed Yang's mental state to the breaking point. Resentment hardened into hatred finally. On August 8th, Shu officially ended their relationship as a parting gesture. He even offered her 5,000 yuan in compensation. The move infuriated Yang in a rage. She warned him that she would not allow his family to live in peace. Their partying that day was tense and hostile in the weeks that followed. Their animosity deepened. Arguments became frequent, some escalating to the point where the police were involved. On September 5, 1996, Yang went to Shu's home and smashed a window with a piece of glass, hoping to provoke a fight between Shu and his wife, Guo Shuken. But her plan backfired. Shu had already confessed the affair to his wife, who had chosen to forgive him. When Guo saw Yang's outburst, she didn't engage. Instead, she simply pulled the curtains and ignored her. Shu, hoping to end the harassment, reported Yang's behavior to the party branch at the school where she worked, asking them to intervene. This public exposure only enraged Yang. Further, being summoned to the school to discuss the matter made her realize that her private scandal was now known to the leadership and her colleagues. Outwardly, she answered the questions calmly, but inside, her self-control was unraveling. Later, Shu would say, "Yang Ye is a bomb," and I was the fuse by that point. The fuse was already lit. In September 9th, 1996, Yang approached a student's parent, claiming she needed to unblock a toilet, despite the parents suggesting safer alternatives. Yang insisted on using sulfuric acid and obtained 500 milliliters of 95% concentrated acid. She later divided it into 2 portions. The next day, September 10th, was both Teacher's Day and Yang's own birthday. That afternoon, she returned home with a bottle of sulfuric acid and a stack of greeting cards from her students. She sat with her husband, Li Chuning, and daughter, reading their warm messages of thanks. In the evening, she went out to dinner with colleagues, taking her daughter along. Li even showed uncharacteristic tenderness, telling her to come home early so he could cook longevity noodles for her, but no gestures could extinguish the vengeful fire burning inside her. Yang knew that Shu's greatest love was his young daughter, and she resolved to make him suffer in the most devastating way possible. She even prepared a suicide note for her husband, writing, "I cannot forgive myself. I must take revenge. I must regain justice from the lecherous beast who deceived and toyed with my feelings." causing him to be tormented by conscience and morality for the rest of his life. Please don't let our child attend the trial. She is too young to bear it. On the morning of September 11th, Yang went to Su Legend's school, Shanghai, your district number 1 elementary. She lied to the staff, claiming Shu's father had asked her to collect the child once she had the girl in her care. Yang took her to an abandoned construction site she had scouted in advance. In a chillingly calm voice, Yang told the child, "Let me wash your hair for you," before pouring an entire bottle of concentrated sulfuric acid over her head. Later, Yang cycled to Shu's home and threw acid at his 36-year-old wife, Guo Shukin, before fleeing. The attack also burned Yang's own hands at 3:00 p.m. that same day. After receiving treatment at a hospital, she was reported to the authorities by her own relatives. The consequences were catastrophic. Su Legend suffered severe burns that blinded both eyes, with damage to her face, body, arms, legs, and genital area, covering 21% of her body. Guo Shukin sustained burns to her face, arms, back, and knees, covering 7% of her body. Both eyelids and corneas were damaged by the acid. On October 24, 1996, the case that had shocked Shanghai went to trial at the Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court when the victims were brought to testify. The little girl's anguished cries pierced the courtroom. "Why did you want to kill us? How could you be so cruel?" The entire room fell into heavy, horrified silence. The courtroom erupted in furious shouts, and the judge was forced to pound the gavel several times to restore order. Emotions were running high. The agonizing cries of the child victim and her mother's screams left everyone present deeply shaken. Even seasoned reporters admitted that their hands trembled while holding their cameras. The disfigured faces and the horrific nature of the injuries drew intense public attention. A thorough investigation. The charge was confirmed: intentional injury. When the trial began, Yang Ya, the woman who had been the focus of Shanghai's attention for over a month, appeared in court. She was short, dressed in a small floral blouse, frail-looking, and wearing black-rimmed glasses. Few could reconcile her mild appearance with the cruelty of the acid attack. Legally, Yang had surrendered herself, and she was also the mother of a young child. She was fully aware of the brutality of her actions and had mentally prepared for a death sentence. In the morning of December 10, 1996, at 9:55 a.m., the Supreme People's Court of Shanghai rejected her appeal. They upheld the death sentence, citing her vicious attack on innocent victims and the severe consequences that followed. At 10:50 a.m., Yang, wearing a red robe, was escorted to the execution ground. A single thunderous gunshot ended her life, closing the chapter on a tragic and destructive extramarital affair story. The story begins in 1939, when Japanese citizens, encouraged by government policies, migrated to islands occupied by Japan. Among them was Kazuko Higa, a 16-year-old from Okinawa, who traveled to Saipan Island with her brother in search of safety. Soon after arriving, Kazuko found work at a local cafe. Her youth and beauty attracted many admirers, one of whom was Shoichi Chiga, a young man also from Okinawa. Shoichi successfully courted Kazuko, and at age 18, she married him because Japan had limited land. The government promoted migration to various Pacific islands to strengthen control over the region. Shoichi's primary job was supervising local laborers. Their marriage was initially happy. In 1944, Shoichi's job duties changed, and he was transferred to Anaton Island, bringing Kazuko with him. They were joined by Kikuo Higa, a plantation manager. Anaton, part of the Mariana Islands, lies about 110 miles north of Saipan. The small, oval-shaped island is roughly 5-6 miles long, 2-3 miles wide, and covers about 12 square miles. Its volcanic mountain rises to about 2,600 feet, and it was once surrounded by thriving coconut plantations, later devastated by typhoons. At the time, only about 20 native residents remained. Shoichi's role was to manage their labor. Not long after their arrival, World War II began turning against Japan. The Pacific Theater saw heavy Japanese losses, and many occupied islands were retaken by U.S. forces worried about his younger sister living on a nearby island. Shoichi left Anatan to visit her, but tragically, he never returned with Shoichi gone. Only Kazuko and her employer, Kikuo, remained among the Japanese on the island in the difficult isolation. The two grew close and began living as a couple there. Fragile peace ended when U.S. forces bombed Anatan. Kazuko and Kikuo hid deep in the island's central forest and survived, however. The bombing destroyed the plantations and nearly all of their supplies. Severing all contact with the outside world, Anatan became truly isolated. Fortunately, about 40 pigs and 20 chickens survived the destruction, providing them with a sustainable food source by carefully tending to the animals. They regained a semblance of normalcy. That peace was short-lived. On June 12, 1944. 4 Japanese fishing vessels were attacked near Anatan. 3 sank immediately, and the 4th, badly damaged, sank soon afterward. Many crew members died. One of the boats went down near Anatan, and some survivors swam to shore ultimately. 31 men made it to the island, 10 Japanese Navy sailors, and 21 civilian crew members. The youngest, just 16, without boats. They were stranded, surviving on wild bananas and coconuts at first. They thought the island was deserted, until one day, while foraging, they unexpectedly came across Kazuko and Kikuo. Having lived in isolation for so long, the couple was overjoyed to meet others. From the two of them, the only other inhabitants of the island were native locals, making communication difficult, suddenly surrounded by fellow Japanese nationals. It felt almost like a reunion with countrymen. Kazuko and Kikuo welcomed new arrivals warmly, sharing food and tending to their injuries. At first, the 31 survivors split into smaller groups, each settling in different parts of the island. Over time, they grew accustomed to one another and eventually began living together as one community. With Kazuko and Kikuo among them with a larger population, food and clothing quickly became urgent priorities. The group soon consumed all the pigs and chickens on the island, leaving only wild fruits, crabs, and other seafood to stave off hunger. They began fishing along the shores. Once food supplies were steady, they learned to ferment coconuts to make alcohol, indulging in their human appetites. Clothing was less of a concern, at least at first. But as months passed, their garments wore out. They improvised by fashioning coverings from tree bark. In this way, the 33 inhabitants lived peacefully for more than a year. On August 15, 1945, Japan officially surrendered, ending the war, but the people on Anatan Island remained unaware of this. And when the U.S. military eventually brought them the news, they dismissed it as an American trick. They refused to leave. Over time, the native residents drifted away, leaving only the 33 Japanese survivors behind. What had once been a peaceful life began to change. The classic extreme gender imbalance caused many of the men to view Kazuko differently. They were young, restless, and full of energy, and tensions grew. To prevent chaos, a few wise members suggested that Kazuko and Kikuo hold a public wedding ceremony. The goal was simple: to make it clear she was married and discourage unwanted advances after the wedding. The couple moved away from the main group, and things settled for a while, but peace was short-lived. In August 1946, the wreckage of a U.S. bomber was discovered on the island. Among the debris were parachutes that could be used for 4 damaged pistols, with 90 rounds of ammunition. 2 of the weapons were eventually repaired by men with prior military experiences. Discovery shattered the island's fragile equality. Power now belonged to those with the guns. The 2 who repaired them, let's call them Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, quickly rose to dominance, claiming the best of everything for themselves, and what they wanted most was Kazuko. Armed and emboldened, they forced Kazuko and her husband to submit to their demands. She endured in silence, powerless against their authority. It wasn't long before the island saw its first suspicious death. A man fell from a coconut tree and died. Yamamoto and Yamaguchi were the only witnesses, and because the victim had clashed with Yamamoto before, Whispers of foul play began circulating. Those without weapons grew fearful for their safety. Yamamoto's arrogance deepened when another man tried to approach Kazuko. Yamamoto and Yamaguchi shot him. The murder sent waves of panic through the camp. The islanders' focus shifted from Kazuko herself to the two pistols that had tipped the balance of power. No one, however, was in greater danger than Kikuo. Constantly watched by the armed men, he devised a risky plan. He approached Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, claiming he no longer wished to be with Kazuko and was willing to leave her to them. Delighted, they praised his wisdom, not realizing they were walking into a trap. Kazuko, seeing the situation with painful clarity, recognized what was about to unfold. Until now, Yamamoto and Yamaguchi had been united by their shared power, but with both now competing to possess her, that alliance would inevitably fracture. Rivalry would replace cooperation, and human nature would drive them toward open conflict. It didn't take long. The men's simmering competition over Kazuko erupted into a violent fight. Yamaguchi emerged victorious, seizing not only the sole woman on the island, but also both pistols. His sudden rise to absolute dominance left the rest of the islanders bitter and resentful. When the strong display their power too openly, it is only a matter of time before the weak strike back. Yamaguchi believed his happiest days had arrived, but his reign was short-lived. Not long afterward, he met an abrupt end. Officially, it was said that he had fallen into the sea and drowned, but everyone knew the truth and chose to remain silent. The pistols once again changed hands, this time to two men named Nakazawa and Iwai. Like those before them, they immediately claimed Kazuko, forcing her once again into submission. A vicious cycle began. For just over a month, the island remained relatively calm until yet another violent quarrel broke out between Nakazawa and Iwai. Iwai emerged the victor, taking sole possession of the guns and monopolizing Kazuko for himself. The situation mirrored earlier events, but Iwai had learned from Yamaguchi's fate. He became obsessively cautious, living each day in fear of assassination. For 2 years, he maintained control until, as if destiny had caught up with him, he too was killed. Over the following years, the shadow of death hung heavily over Anatong Island. 3 more men died under suspicious circumstances by then. 9 lives had been lost, each death understood, though never openly admitted, to be linked to gun violence. Finally, the remaining survivors held a meeting to confront the problem. They concluded that the pistols were the root of all their suffering. If the weapons were destroyed, power would no longer be concentrated in any one person's hands. They agreed on a plan. Kazuko would marry one man, and afterward the 2 pistols would be thrown into the sea with no weapons to fight over, and Kazuko officially paired with someone. There would be no reason for further conflict. The plan seemed sound, and it was carried out, yet peace still eluded them in the days that followed. For more mysterious deaths and disappearances occurred even without the pistols. Fear persisted. Within 5 years, the original 32 men had dwindled to only 19 survivors. Another meeting was called. This time, they concluded that the competition for Kazuko was the true cause of their strife. With the guns gone, she was now the only prize left to fight over. The group made a grim decision. Kazuko must be eliminated in their eyes. This was the only way to remove temptation and restore order. They planned to kill her the next day, but that night, a man who loved Kazuko deeply warned her of the plot. She fled into the dense forest, surviving off her instincts and hiding among the island's rocky crevices. Sanatan Island, covering nearly 12 square miles and thick with vegetation, made searching for her difficult. For 33 days she evaded capture. Then, in June 1950, she spotted a U.S. warship anchored offshore. Desperate, she climbed a tree, tore off her clothing, and waved frantically while shouting for help. Her cries caught the attention of the crew, and she was rescued. Once aboard, she told her story in detail. The U.S. military relayed the news to the remaining Japanese men on the island, but they refused to believe it. Convinced it was an American deception, Kazuko returned to Japan and informed the The families about the survivors' relatives began sending letters, urging the men to come home. More than 200 letters reached the island, but the men remained steadfast in their belief that it was all a trick. Finally, on June 26, 1951, one man received a letter he recognized as genuine, written by his wife, whose handwriting he knew well. Convinced of its authenticity, he persuaded the others to accept the truth. The war was over. The group surrendered to the U.S. military, was transported to Guam, and eventually returned to Japan after so many years missing. Most had been presumed dead, and many of their wives had remarried, including Kazuko's former husband, Shichihige, who was now happily settled with someone else. When reporters asked about the 13 men who did not return, the survivors gave conflicting accounts, only fueling suspicion about what had truly happened on Anaton Island. The truth eventually surfaced when one survivor, under intense pressure, could no longer keep the secret. It was revealed that the men had killed one another in a deadly rivalry over a single woman. The media seized upon the story, thrusting Kazuko Higa into the national spotlight and turning her into one of the most infamous figures in post-war Japan. Reporters gave her a string of sensational nicknames: the Queen of Anatahan Island, the Woman with 32 Faces, the Queen Bee, and the Woman Who Bewitches Men, while a few outlets expressed sympathy, acknowledging that she had been forced to endure humiliation and make painful compromises in an impossible situation. Most condemned her harshly. The public debate over her role in the tragedy divided Japanese society. In 1952, Kazuko was invited to star as herself in the theatrical production Island of Anatahan, touring across Japan for 2 years. The following year, the events were adapted into the film, The Saga of Anatahan, in which she also played herself. Her brief acting career brought her public attention, but it could not sustain her financially. She eventually turned to working as a dancer in Tokyo to make a living. At 34, Kazuko remarried, opening a small shop with her husband and beginning what seemed like a quieter, more stable chapter, but her happiness was short-lived. Her husband passed away when she was in her early 40s. In March 1974, Kazuko died of a brain tumor at around 50 years old, closing the final chapter of her turbulent life. The Anatahan Island incident, though confined to a remote corner of the Pacific, reflected deep truths about human nature. When law and order collapse, morality often erodes, and primal instincts, hunger, fear, desire, resurface in such extreme conditions. Personal choices are easily crushed beneath collective pressures. Despite the continued criticism she faced, Kazuko was ultimately a victim, a woman trapped in a lawless world, forced to comply to survive. Her story is less one of scandal than of endurance in the face of total social and moral collapse. Now, let's move to a case that unfolded in Tokyo's Akihabara district, an area famous for its themed cafes, particularly maid cafes, which have become a defining feature of the neighborhood. Among the lesser-known, but equally popular attractions is the ear-cleaning salon in Japan. These establishments often employ young women dressed in traditional yukata, who greet customers warmly before leading them into private tatami rooms. There, the client rests their head on the technician's lap while she uses a set of specialized tools to clean the ears. Some salons offer optional extras such as neck massages or light arm and leg rubs. The protagonist of this case, Ajiri Miho, was born in July 1988 after graduating from high school. She first worked as a salesperson at a dim sum restaurant. Chronic back pain eventually forced her to quit, and she later found employment at an Akihabara ear cleaning shop by January 2008. After honing her technique and learning to adapt her touch to each customer, Miho had built a loyal client base. She listened attentively during sessions, engaging customers in easy conversation, which quickly earned her a reputation as one of the shop's most sought-after technicians. Using the professional alias, Marina, Miho was not a conventional beauty, but her light makeup, gentle demeanor, and skillful hands drew many repeat customers. She soon became the shop's top ear cleaner, earning as much as 680,000 yen per month, about 4,400 United States dollars. An impressive income for a high school graduate. Her success even landed her a guest spot on a television program showcasing her work, but just as her career was peaking, tragedy was on the horizon in February 2008, on a mild spring day. A 40-year-old man named Hayashi Koji came across an online listing for a highly rated ear cleaning salon in Akihabara. Curious, he booked an appointment under the alias Yoshikawa. Koji lived in Chiba City, Chiba Prefecture, roughly 25 miles from Akihabara, on his day off. He took the train into Tokyo and found the shop without trouble. The standard rates were 2,700 yen for 30 minutes and 4,800 yen for 1 hour, with an extra 500 yen to request a specific technician. This was a legitimate ear cleaning salon. No sexual services, no physical contact permitted beyond the cleaning process itself. Customers were strictly forbidden to touch the staff during the session. Koji's attendant that day was Miho, and he chose the 1-hour package. The moment Koji laid eyes on her, he was instantly drawn in by her sweet and charming demeanor. The ear cleaning session left him feeling deeply relaxed, and within days, he returned to the shop, this time paying the extra 500 yen to specifically request Miho. Koji, a 40-year-old single man living alone in Chiba City, had ample free time outside of work, despite the round trip to Akihabara taking more than 2 hours. He had no hesitation about making the journey to see Miho again. At first, he booked 1-hour sessions, but these gradually extended to 2 hours, and sometimes even 3. Before long, he was visiting every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday 3 times a week. For most people, ear cleaning is recommended no more than once a week, as the skin inside the ear canal is delicate and prone to irritation. Redness and swelling are normal after a session, but excessive cleaning can cause infections. Koji's frequency clearly hinted at motives beyond the service itself. Eventually, Miho hesitated to provide him with such frequent ear cleaning. Instead, their time together shifted to chatting, watching DVDs, playing games, and sharing sweets. His longest stay at the shop stretched to 8 hours, and his daily spending sometimes exceeded 10,000 yen. In Tuesday, July 15, 2008, Miho's 20th birthday, Koji was supposed to be at work. Instead, he took the day off, dressed neatly, and brought her a gift waiting outside the shop for her arrival. He caught her by surprise. Miho had no interest in meeting customers outside of work, especially after previous unpleasant encounters with overly familiar clients. She quickly reported the matter to the shop manager, asking them to set boundaries. Koji, overhearing her, left quietly, looking dejected. The incident left Miho uneasy. The thought of becoming a stalking target frightened her, and she kept her guard up. But the very next day, Koji booked another appointment and brought up the previous day's events. Miho explained that she had dealt with similar situations before and found them extremely uncomfortable. Koji tried to reassure her with vague, indirect remarks, persuading her to overlook the incident. Their interactions seemed to return to normal. After that, since meeting Miho, Koji had visited the shop a total of 154 times between December 27, 2008 and January 4, 2009. He even came 9 days in a row. Her gentle manner and caring personality had completely captivated him at work. He would sometimes smile to himself, lost in thought, prompting colleagues to suspect he had fallen in love, something he had never experienced in his 41 years there. Relationship became casual enough for Koji to drop formal honorifics when speaking to her, which fueled his hopes. During one session, he asked, "What do you think of my appearance? Am I ugly, average, or handsome?" Miho, not wanting to offend, paused before replying, "A little above average." This only encouraged him. He soon began pressing to meet her outside of work again, but Miho refused, citing strict shop rules as a precaution. She even showed him photos of her family and mentioned she did not live alone, hoping it would dissuade him from further advances. Koji then approached the shop manager, pleading for their help, but the manager refused to intervene and reminded him to respect boundaries. Koji persisted, Arguing his case without success, Koji's background painted the picture of an introverted but hard-working man after graduating from a vocational school in electrical work. He became a repair technician for a power distribution equipment company, unlike his colleagues. He never went drinking after work and preferred to quietly sip tea at company gatherings. This wasn't due to a dislike of alcohol. He was physically unable to drink because, at 26, he had been diagnosed with a connective tissue disorder. Symptoms included rashes, unexplained fevers, joint swelling, and muscle pain, though treatment had brought the condition under control. The risk of recurrence lingered. This health burden, combined with his reserved nature, made marriage seem unlikely to him. He had grown up in a family of 4. His parents and a younger brother and had lived alone in Chiba City for years. He was not considered attractive to women and had never been in a romantic relationship, having over 10 million yen in savings and a stable monthly income. Most of Koji's earnings were poured into visits to the ear cleaning shop. Miho, in turn, continued serving him to maintain her income, though she was becoming increasingly unsettled by his behavior. On April 5, 2009, after completing a session, Koji invited Miho to dinner at a family restaurant that evening. She politely declined, explaining that she already had plans with a friend. Frustrated, Koji pressed, saying in a firm tone, "Then let's do it tomorrow." Startled, Miho simply nodded to end the exchange. Shaken, she later broke down in front of her co-workers and pleaded with the shop manager to bar Koji from returning. Her request was granted, and Koji was officially banned, unable to enter the shop. Koji began calling and sending apologetic messages to Miho, but she ignored them. By early May, his persistence escalated. He started waiting outside the shop and secretly following her home after work. Eventually, he learned where she lived. One evening, Miho spotted him near her house. Terrified, she rejected his pleas for attention and began relying on co-workers to escort her home. On July 19th, Koji confronted her again on her way back from work, grabbing her hand. He said, "I can't sleep because I miss you. Can I come back to the shop?" Horrified, Miho pulled away and fled to a nearby convenience store, where she called. The police officers took her statement, but Koji was nowhere to be found. From that day forward, Miho cut off all contact, fueling Koji's resentment and planting darker intentions in his mind. The attack on the morning of August 3, 2009, Koji packed a hammer, a paring knife, and a kitchen knife into his bag at 8:52 a.m. He left his apartment and headed to Miho's home. By chance, the front door was unlocked. He stepped inside, where Miho's 78-year-old grandmother spotted the intruder and screamed. Koji immediately struck her with the hammer, killing her. He then rushed upstairs to Miho's room, awakened by the noise. Miho barely had time to react before Koji stabbed her 12 times. Miho's mother and younger brother, who were also home, managed to escape and call the police. Koji, however, made no attempt to flee. He sat on the floor in silence, staring blankly at the scene. Eventually, he washed his hands, removed his clothes, and walked outside where police were waiting to arrest him. The grandmother was pronounced dead at the scene. Miho was rushed to the hospital and initially survived, but succumbed to her injuries a month later. Trial and sentencing. In February 2010, Koji stood trial at the Tokyo District Court, charged with premeditated murder. The prosecution sought the death penalty during the proceedings. Koji admitted to the crimes and delivered a tearful apology to the victims' families after 2 weeks of hearings. The presiding judge concluded that although Koji's actions were selfish and impulsive, his deep remorse and emotional distress argued against capital punishment. He was sentenced to life in prison. Koji accepted the verdict and chose not to appeal. Miho had been a kind and diligent young woman since childhood. After graduating high school, she gave up further education to help support her family, hoping to one day buy her parents their own home. Her father, devastated by the loss, spoke of her selflessness and bright future, cut short in an act of senseless violence. Just 22 years old, she had also been a rising star in the wrestling ring, known for her fierce in-ring persona. She was feared by opponents, but beloved by fans who knew her gentle nature off stage. No one could have predicted that a career controversy over wrestling attire would mark the beginning of her tragic downward spiral. The next story uncovers the haunting final chapter of another young woman's life, Hana Kimura, a beloved wrestler and social media personality whose passing hides a painful truth. Regarded as one of Japan's most promising female wrestlers, Hana Kimura was born on September 3, 1997, in Yokohama City, Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan. Her father was Indonesian, and her mother, Kyoko Kimura, was a renowned professional wrestler in her own right. When Hana was just a year old, her parents divorced, and she moved to Tokyo with her mother at the time. Kyoko faced enormous pressure, balancing her wrestling career with raising a young child. During busy periods, she would take Hana to the wrestling arenas, making the sport a familiar and constant part of her daughter's early life. While Hana often appeared cheerful and adorable in front of the camera, her childhood and school years were far from happy. The main reason was her mixed heritage. Being only half Japanese made her a target for ridicule and bullying from classmates. This caused deep emotional pain and isolation, leaving her with little choice but to rely on her own company. She had very few friends, yet she longed for acceptance and connection. Always eager to please others, Hana would go out of her way to help, sharing her food and toys. Over time, she developed a people-pleasing personality, which, while seemingly admirable, often meant putting others' needs before her own. This tendency made life emotionally exhausting and left her vulnerable to being taken advantage of by high school. Hana had grown into a beautiful young woman with boundless enthusiasm. She briefly considered a career in modeling or acting, drawn by her striking looks, but soon realized how challenging and competitive those paths were. Ultimately, perhaps influenced by her mother's legacy and her own upbringing in the wrestling world, she decided to follow in Kyoko's footsteps and become a professional wrestler. Kyoko fully supported her decision, even training Hana personally when possible. Still, knowing her daughter needed more structured coaching, she enrolled her in WrestleOne's professional wrestling school, where Hana could receive rigorous, systematic training. Many people confuse wrestling with grappling, but there's a distinction. Grappling is a traditional combat sport centered on strength and technique, with the goal of pinning an opponent to win. An Olympic discipline, professional wrestling, on the other hand, while still requiring technical skill, blends athletic competition with performance and scripted storylines, much like WWE in the United States. Globally, there are three dominant wrestling styles: Japanese, American, and Mexican, and wrestlers don't always need to have imposing physiques. Hana Kimura was a perfect example, with years of disciplined training, sharp technical skills, and captivating looks. She quickly stood out. She made her debut in March 2016 at the age of 19. Leaving school to fully commit to wrestling, her talent clearly inherited from her mother Shoni. Immediately on September 18, 2016, she claimed her first title, the JWP Junior Championship. She went on to win the Artist of Stardom Championship twice. One of those victories alongside her mother. This mother-daughter team drew huge fan attention. In January 22, 2017, Ki officially retired in her farewell match. She faced Hana, and Hana emerged victorious. Later, Hana joined the Odo Tai faction, a group her mother had once been part of. On June 21, 2017, Hana and her tag partner Kogetsu captured the Goddess of Stardom Championship, defending it successfully for nearly a year. The year 2017 was packed with matches and tournaments, as Hana built her reputation. By January 9, 2018, she announced her participation in WrestleOne's World Tryout League, marking another milestone in her steadily advancing career. On March 25, 2019, she transitioned to Stardom full-time, becoming leader of the Tokyo Cyber Squad faction. Her success continued, adding more titles to her name: the Artist of Stardom Championship, the Goddess of Stardom Championship, and the prestigious 2019 5-Star Grand Prix Tournamental. though she never secured the world championship belt. Her achievements were remarkable. Stardom recognized her as not just a star in the ring, but also a key figure in shaping the promotion's future, trusting her to help train and mentor the next generation of wrestlers in just over 3 years. Since her debut, Hana Kimura had become a decorated athlete and one of the most recognizable faces in Japanese professional wrestling. A rising star whose light burned brightly for all to see, Hana had a promising career ahead of her, with the potential to achieve even greater success in professional wrestling. But in September 2019, a sudden and devastating turn of events cast a dark shadow over her future that year. She was invited to participate in the hit Japanese reality TV show Terrace House since 2012. The Fuji television program had followed the lives of 3 men and 3 women living together in a luxury home, documenting their journey from strangers to friends and sometimes romantic partners. The producers claimed the show was completely unscripted, with all emotions being genuine. Part of its success came from casting attractive, charismatic individuals, including celebrities, to boost its appeal. The formula worked. Terrace House quickly became a viewer favorite, and in 2015, Netflix partnered with Fuji Television to co-produce it. Episodes aired on Netflix before being broadcast on Fuji TV, and the new partnership expanded casting to include participants from around the world. By 2019, the show had been on the air for 8 years, boasting a massive and loyal fan base. Hana joined Terrace House, Tokyo, 2019 to 2020, a season that, like its predecessors, was met with enthusiasm from audiences early on. She seemed to connect with fellow cast member and actor Kobayashi Kai. Their interactions were lighthearted, and they even went on a few private dates. Viewers were charmed by Hana's personality, soft-spoken and sweet off-screen, yet fierce and powerful in the wrestling ring. But everything changed in episode 38, ominously titled The Costume Incident. Hana's favorite wrestling outfit, a custom-made piece worth about 100,000 yen, was accidentally damaged. She had left it in the laundry area, where Kobayashi unintentionally washed it with his own clothes and placed it in the dryer. The costume shrank and became discolored, irreparably ruined for Hana. The value wasn't just monetary, was a cherished part of her career, worn in many hard-fought matches. Although Kobayashi apologized, Hana, overwhelmed with emotion, lashed out in front of the others. She voiced her anger sharply, and even pulled off his hat before storming away. The outburst shocked viewers. Many began to believe her sweet, approachable image on the show was fake, and that her real personality was aggressive and hot-tempered, just like her wrestling persona. When the episode aired on Netflix on March 31st, 2020, Hana's social media accounts were inundated with hate. Comments ranged from dismissive, "It's just a costume," "Stop overreacting," too deeply insulting, with some resorting to name-calling and personal attacks. Ironically, the controversy boosted the show's visibility, as drama often keeps reality TV audiences hooked, much like in The Truman Show. Producers of Terrace House were known to introduce dramatic twists, sometimes even competitive tension, between female cast members to maintain viewer interest. But for Hana, the sudden surge of online abuse was unbearable. Sensitive and deeply concerned about others' opinions, she sought help from the production team. Their response was disheartening. They suggested she take walks, exercise, or meet friends too. Cope. She stayed at a friend's place for a week, and another cast member, Nino, tried to console her on social media, saying, "Your troubles aren't such a big deal. I get criticized every day still." The harassment continued, and Hana kept her pain hidden from her family. The COVID-19 pandemic only worsened things. Filming for Terrace House and wrestling matches were suspended, leaving her alone in her apartment with no distractions from the relentless negativity online. Over a month later, the volume of hateful messages began to ease, but then came another blow. On May 14, 2020, the production team released previously unaired behind-the-scenes footage of the costume incident. Some clips portrayed Hana in an even less favorable light. Just 4 days later, on May 18th, Fuji Television aired the full episode nationwide, reigniting the controversy now. Even wrestling fans who hadn't been following Terrace House joined in the criticism. Her social media pages were once again flooded with abuse. This renewed wave of hostility pushed Hannah to her breaking point. Hannah's breaking point came in late May 2020 on social media. She began posting messages filled with despair. My grandmother always said I was her favorite grandchild. Why do so many people want me gone? I'm sorry for still being alive. I'm sorry for not being a good person. I'm sorry for making everyone uncomfortable. If I disappeared, would everyone forgive me? Would people love me then? No matter what, I still love everyone. Even in that moment of vulnerability, some commenters responded with cruelty. When are you finally going to disappear? It was the final blow in the early hours of May 23rd. Hannah carefully placed her beloved adopted cat into a cardboard box and left it outside her wrestling company's office. Ensuring it would be safe at 3:00 a.m., she posted her final words to Twitter and Instagram, alongside photos, some with her cat, others showing her room bathed in red light every day. I received nearly 100 hateful comments. I can't deny how deeply they've hurt me, Mom. Thank you for bringing me into this world. I've always yearned to be loved. Thank you to everyone who supported me. I love you all. I'm sorry. I've been too weak. She sent a private message to her mother as well. I'm sorry. Mom, I can't endure this anymore. Please, live happily. When Kyoko saw the message, she called immediately. The phone was already off. She raced to Hannah's apartment with emergency responders, but it was too late. Hannah had died from gas poisoning at just 22 years old. A note taped to her door read, "Beware of toxic gas." Even in her final moments, Hannah thought about others' safety after her death. The hateful comments that had once flooded her social media suddenly vanished, likely deleted by the very people who had written them. Fearing backlash, tributes poured in from fans, wrestlers, and even strangers, leaving many to wonder if only she had lived to see how many truly loved her. For Kyoko, the loss was unbearably, and she refused to accept the narrative forming in the media that her daughter had simply been too sensitive to online criticism. She knew the real story. Hannah had told her, just a week before her death, that Terrace House producers had pressured her to act more aggressive and to maintain her wrestling villain persona. The infamous costume incident, Kyoko insisted, was no organic outburst, was manufactured drama. Private messages later confirmed it. The production team kept urging me to slap him. I couldn't. It's not who I am, so I just took his hat instead. But I feel so guilty about it. In another message, Hannah wrote bitterly, "Now everyone is yelling at me. Their stunt for views worked. I'm sure the production team is satisfied." Weekly, Bunchen would later obtain messages between Hannah, her friends, and the production team, showing clear manipulation. The unscripted show was anything but. Cast members signed contracts with strict confidentiality clauses and penalties in the millions of yen for speaking out. In return, they were paid only 100,000 yen a month, a token sum for the psychological toll it could take. Kobayashi also shared that there had been instances of production manipulation during filming. For example, in one episode, he and Hannah filmed a date scene at a stadium where they were playing on a trampoline. According to Kobayashi, the production team suggested that just jumping on the trampoline is boring. Why not take this chance to touch her chest? He refused. He claimed the production team often intervened, deliberately creating shocking or uncomfortable scenarios to attract viewers. Several other former Terrace House cast members supported this claim, alleging that producers frequently interfered in interactions, guiding cast members to create drama and conflict for the sake of ratings. Fuji Television, however, firmly denied these allegations, stating there had been no such incident of staged groping or inappropriate suggestions. They announced an internal investigation, later releasing a self-produced report claiming no evidence of staging or manipulation was found. Many viewers, however, dismissed the report as a self-serving cover-up intended to avoid accountability in the wake of Hannah's tragic death. Terrace House halted filming of the remaining episodes and eventually ceased production altogether, ending the show's 8-run episodes featuring Hannah were removed from circulation. Meanwhile, Tokyo police launched an investigation into the hateful online comments directed at Hannah, with the intent to prosecute those responsible for defamation. Authorities estimated the number of comments in the thousands, but the investigation faced major hurdles. Many posts and accounts disappeared immediately after her deaths. On July 9, 2020, Hannah's mother, Q, made a public appeal for evidence of defamatory remarks. Supporters sent her screenshots of abusive messages. Japanese police also contacted Twitter and Instagram, requesting deleted comment data to identify the account holders, but both platforms refused, citing policies on protecting user privacy. This left police with limited legal options. Instead of pursuing defamation charges, which have a 1-year statute of limitations in Japan, they charged perpetrators with the lesser offense of insult. Penalties for this charge were minimal, often resulting in fines of less than 10,000 yen. It was not until December 2020 and April 2021 that police identified 2 men who had posted abusive comments. Both were fined just 9,000 yen each, a sum many saw as insultingly small, given the harm caused. The third man was later ordered by a court to pay 1,290,000 yen in damages, but he refused to pay, and the matter eventually faded from public attention. Despite these setbacks, Kyoko continued her fight for justice. She argued that Japan's laws were far too lenient in cases of cyberbullying. With public support, she lobbied the government to strengthen legislation. On June 13, 2022, Japan's upper house passed an amendment to the Penal Code, introducing harsher penalties for online harassment. Under the new law, offenders could face up to 1 year in prison and fines of up to 300,000 yen, compared to the previous maximum of 30 days detention and fines under 10,000 yen. Bill sparked heated debate. Critics feared it might infringe on free speech and limit government criticism, while supporters stressed the urgent need to combat online abuse. Kyoko told reporters, "Although the law cannot bring my daughter back, I hope it helps people understand that cyberbullying is a crime." While the law's passage marked a major victory, it did little to ease Kyoko's grief or her anger toward those she holds responsible. On December 6, 2022, she filed a lawsuit against Fuji Television and Terrace House producers, accusing them of intentionally staging and editing footage to portray Hannah in a negative light. Contributing to her death, she demanded 142 million yen, about $916,000 USD. In Damages, Kyoko said she initially did not want to sue, but was appalled by Fuji Television's unwillingness to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Just over a month after Hannah's death, cast member Nayo, who had once comforted her, posted photos of himself happily spending time with other cast members too. This day, Kyoko's lawsuit has yet to be accepted by the court, and legal experts believe it is unlikely to move forward. Reality shows have surged in popularity in recent years because the public is fascinated by the daily lives and personalities of celebrities, which are often a mystery. These programs appear to offer an authentic glimpse into the private world of famous people, seemingly bridging the gap between fans and their idols. Hannah's tragic story exposed a harsh truth. So-called unscripted reality shows are rarely genuine. Almost all involve some degree of producer manipulation, even if the producers don't directly interfere with the footage. It is never broadcast live. Instead, episodes undergo extensive editing and splicing, giving producers full control over what the audience sees and what is hidden. Through carefully crafted editing, producers shape the storyline to fit their objectives. What viewers see is selectively curated, essentially making reality TV no different from a scripted drama disguised as authenticity. Even live broadcasts can be manipulated, much like the fictional world in The Truman Show, reflecting on the story of Hannah Kimura, a 22-year-old rising wrestling star. One can't help but wonder if she hadn't joined Terrace House, would her life have taken a completely different path? The producers were wrong to deliberately stage and manipulate content. The online bullies were wrong to heap relentless abuse on another human being. The show could be cancelled, and hateful comments deleted but for a lost life. Is there any way to rewind time? A single cruel word can become the last straw that pushes someone into despair, while a kind word can spark hope in someone. On the Edge Story 5 Cornhill, a prestigious residential area in northeastern Hong Kong, was home to apartment 312 in Tower D, where the Pung family lived. The head of the household, Mr. Pung, 57, owned a dye shop, while his wife, Mrs. Mai, 58, was a homemaker who seldom left the house. The couple had 2 daughters. Their eldest, Pung Ming, 27, worked as a secretary for a foreign company, and their younger daughter, Pung Chi, was married and living in the United States, but would visit her parents during holidays from the outside. The Pungs seemed like a happy, respectable family living a comfortable life. No one could have anticipated the bizarre crime that would soon shatter their family and send shockwaves through Hong Kong. The case began on Thursday, March 31st, 1988, around 5 p.m., when a young woman, accompanied by her lawyer, arrived at the North Point police station. She was Pung Ming, who reported that her father had been missing for over a month and that she had no idea of his whereabouts. Furthermore, her mother had recently confessed to killing him. Mrs. Mai had been acting strangely and appeared mentally unstable, prompting Ming to seek police intervention. Ming provided a detailed account about a month earlier, on Monday, February 22nd. After a long day at work, she returned late to their apartment. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it bolted from the inside. Slightly confused, she assumed her parents had locked up and gone to bed after ringing the doorbell repeatedly. Her mother finally opened the door. Ming noticed blood dripping from her mother's nose before she could react. Her mother sat down and began wiping the floor with a towel, where a pool of blood lay at the time. Ming assumed her mother had a nosebleed and didn't question further. She asked if her father was asleep, but her mother didn't look up and coldly replied, "Your father hit me and tried to strangle me with a towel, so I hit him with a hammer and killed him." Ming was shocked by this strange response, but dismissed it as anger-fueled words. She couldn't imagine her mother harming anyone. She decided to ask her father directly and went to the master bedroom, but her mother shouted at her not to enter. Startled and exhausted, Ming did not press further and instead withdrew to her own room. In the following days, Ming continued her routine, going to work as usual, apart from her father's absence. Nothing else seemed unusual. Preoccupied by work, she nearly forgot about that night. Later, her mother announced the family wanted to move, so they relocated from Cornhill to Shanta Street in the Wan Chai district, about 8 miles away. After settling into the new home, Ming still had not seen her father. Afraid of her mother's reaction, she avoided asking questions. This indifferent attitude wasn't new. The family had long been accustomed to moving frequently. Ming recounted that her mother often insisted their house was haunted, which led the family to move 4 times within just 5 years. In recent years, her parents' relationship had deteriorated significantly, and arguments became frequent. Ming thought her father might have gone out to relax, or perhaps visit a mistress, as her mother had previously mentioned. As time passed, with no sign of her father, Ming received a call from her uncle, her father's elder brother and owner of the dye shop, who said that her father hadn't been to the shop for a long time. This prompted Ming to search for her father by calling and visiting places he might frequent, but she could find no trace of him. Suddenly, she recalled her mother's earlier statement about having killed him, and she began to suspect it might be true. Ming shared her concerns with her uncle. Upon hearing the story, her uncle broke into a cold sweat, sensing something was seriously wrong, and urged her to call the police. However, Ming hesitated. She wanted to uncover where her father had gone and whether her mother had truly harmed him. Later, she discovered a handwritten letter in her mother's safe. The letter, written before her father's disappearance, detailed the unfair treatment her mother had endured at her husband's hands. She complained of the pain She had suffered and expressed a desire for proper compensation. She wrote that since their marriage in May 1959, she had given birth to 2 daughters and, while she hadn't contributed financially, she had dedicated herself to caring for the family. The letter revealed her husband had been unfaithful for over 15 years, engaging in multiple extramarital affairs, and fathering an illegitimate son. It further stated that he had emotionally abandoned her for more than 15 years, and that they no longer lived as a married couple. She described enduring harsh treatment, both in the household and financially, and despite repeatedly asking him for fair treatment, he had threatened to kill her. She bore this mistreatment for years, living in constant fear that one day he might lose his temper and act on his threats. Feeling utterly hopeless, she wrote that no one could resolve the injustices she felt inside. After reading the letter, Ming became convinced her father's disappearance was highly suspicious and likely connected to her mother. On March 31, 1988, over a month after her father had vanished, Ming found herself overwhelmed by the situation and deeply anxious. She sought advice from a lawyer who agreed to accompany her to the police station. At the station, through tears, Ming recounted the entire story because the case involved a possible human life. The police handed it over to the Serious Crimes Unit for investigation. The investigators paid close attention to Ming's account. After all, there was no plausible reason for an adult man with a legitimate business to suddenly abandon his assets and disappear without explanation. Moreover, his wife had confessed to killing him, making Mrs. Mai the prime suspect. On the morning of April 1, 1988, investigators from the Serious Crimes Unit visited Mrs. Mai's residence on Shanta Street in the Wan Chai district. Mai was a thin, middle-aged woman who appeared mentally unstable during the police investigation. She locked herself in the bathroom, refused to turn on the lights, eat, or come out after prolonged persuasion by the officers. She finally emerged. Patient female officer conducted the interrogation, during which Mai began to speak and revealed a shocking secret. Born in Guangdong in 1930 into a large, impoverished family, Mai had left home alone to make a living in Hong Kong. There, she met Mr. Puang, a local resident 1 year her junior. They developed a romantic relationship, and Mai believed Puang was an honest man with no gambling habits, a man she could entrust with her future. In May 1959, 29-year-old Mai married 28-year-old Puang. A year later, their first daughter, Puang Ming, was born to outsiders. The family appeared happy with the arrival of their daughter, but the reality was very different. After giving birth, Mai's health deteriorated, and she frequently fell ill. Her husband showed no concern for her well-being and often spent nights away from home when questioned. He offered excuses like playing mahjong with friends and staying out late. Over time, their younger daughter, Pung Chi, was born. By then, Pung's attitude toward his wife had worsened significantly. The couple argued often or maintained a cold silence. Their marriage became more of a cohabitation than a relationship with emotional connection. Whenever Mai was beaten by Puang, she vented her frustrations on her 2 daughters, blaming them for his indifference. With no one else to rely on, Mai accepted this life, unwilling to make changes despite her suffering. Over the next 25 years, the 2 daughters grew up, with Pung Chi marrying early and moving to the United States. The remaining family members continued moving frequently until settling in apartment 312 of Tower D, Cornhill Garden, in 1982. From 1982 onward, Mai's mental health steadily declined. She became aware of her husband's infidelity and felt abandoned and mistreated. Though she once found solace in Buddhism, she eventually felt ignored by Buddha and stopped lighting incense. Losing her last spiritual support, Mai was a kind-hearted housewife who disliked going out and devoted herself entirely to caring for the family. With no close friends or outlets for her emotions, she bottled up her deepest feelings, causing her personality to change over time. She became increasingly withdrawn, distancing herself from family and friends. When encountering neighbors during walks, she avoided greetings and never revealed her real name. She told her daughters She constantly heard strange noises near her ears and believed monsters or ghosts haunted their home because of these fears. The family moved 4 times between 1982 and 1987 additionally. My often warned her eldest daughter never to share their phone number or address with anyone, however. Her strange behavior failed to capture her husband's attention. Her eldest daughter recalled that her mother's constant suspicion and erratic behavior severely affected the family's harmony gradually. Even Ming became less concerned about her mother's mental state. Puang harbored deep resentment toward his wife, Gigi, believing she had failed to give him a son to carry on his legacy in his 30s. He began an affair and fathered a son with his mistress, secretly moving them into the attic of his dye shop. When Gigi discovered this, she was furious and confronted him, demanding to know why he treated her so cruelly. Puang refused to explain and insisted on divorcing her, wanting to make his mistress his legal wife. Their marriage reached a stalemate, with no income of her own. Gigi was entirely dependent on others, and unwilling to give up the marriage without securing a financial settlement. She adamantly resisted divorce. As they couldn't agree on finances from that point on, the couple completely turned their backs on each other later. Puang sold one of his properties, earning 200,000 Hong Kong dollars on February 22, 1988. The day of the incident, Gigi grew anxious that Puang would use that money to support his mistress and illegitimate son. She demanded he give her the money and insisted that he cut off all contact with them, enraged by her demands. Puang felt she was being unreasonably troublesome and, in a fit of anger, struck her on the head with a hammering, able to hold back any longer. Gigi grabbed another hammer left behind by a decorator and fought back during the struggle. The hammer struck Puang on the head, causing him to collapse unconscious and eventually die, overcome with fear upon realizing her husband was dead. Gigi chose not to call the police instead. She decided to destroy all evidence and erase any traces of the crime after careful consideration. She concluded that disposing of the body intact would be too risky, as someone might discover it. She decided to dismember the body. She called a part-time housekeeper, who occasionally cleaned her home, and asked her to buy a power saw. Gigi planned to use the saw to cut up the body. However, having never used one before, she found the saw's loud noise and high-frequency vibrations scattered debris everywhere, fearing it would attract attention. She abandoned the power saw and switched to a hand saw. Although the hand required more effort, it was much quieter and less likely to arouse suspicion among neighbors. After finishing the dismemberment, she looked at the body parts and murmured, "If you hadn't pushed me again and again, it wouldn't have come to this." She then contemplated how to dispose of the remains. Directly discarding them would risk immediate discovery, so she decided to process the parts first. She placed some in a large steamer to cook them, aiming to prevent decomposition odors and blood leakage once cooked. She packed the body parts, including bones and flesh, into several trash bags and disposed of the bags in different garbage bins around the residential area. The police were horrified when Gigi recounted her process. They couldn't believe that the frail elderly woman before them could have brutally attacked her husband, dismembered, and cooked his body all by herself. Investigators doubted her story, suspecting she might have imagined the events or that someone else had carried out the act. For her, the biggest challenge was that by the time the police arrested Gigi, over a month had passed since the crime. The body parts she claimed to have discarded had long been taken to landfill sites and were irretrievable, leaving her confession as the sole piece of evidence. Furthermore, her mental state was highly unstable, making it difficult to distinguish between truth and delusion. There was even a possibility that she had imagined parts of the story. However, as the investigation progressed, police began to believe her confession was truthful. They visited the crime scene at apartment 312, Tower D, Cornhill. The apartment was completely empty, with no proper furniture, no human remains, no dental tissue, personal belongings, or documents belonging to the victim found. The entire apartment appeared spotless, with no visible bloodstains, giving no indication a murder had occurred all. Though Gigi had claimed to have used a power saw that scattered evidence throughout the rooms, the scene was remarkably clean in her confession. She mentioned that after dismembering the body, blood had splattered on the wardrobe, curtains, walls, corners, and even the ceiling. She said she immediately cleaned the bloodstains, but couldn't remove all traces from the mattress to cover stains on the mattress and bedding. She contacted a part-time housekeeper and asked her to purchase black ink, which she used to mask the blood. She then called movers to dispose of kitchen tools, hammers, the power saw, and the handsaw. Most household items were either sold or discarded, leaving only 2 wardrobes, which she had moved to her new residence on Shanta Street. Police inspected these wardrobes and found traces of blood invisible to the naked eye. Additionally, a small amount of human tissue was discovered in the kitchen drainage pipes at Cornhill Garden at the time. However, Hong Kong lacked DNA testing technology, so it was impossible to confirm definitively whether the samples belonged to Phuong blood type. Testing revealed that the samples matched the victim's blood type, but this evidence was insufficient to prove guilt. While police struggled to piece together the case, they received a surprising confession call from a man named Mazan Kwan, who identified himself as Gigi's younger brother. He admitted that, prior to the crime, his sister had approached him for help. According to Mazan, Gigi told him, "Your brother-in-law sold a property for 200,000 Hong Kong dollars and plans to give the money to his mistress and illegitimate child. I need you to help me get that money back, and I'll pay 8,000 Hong Kong dollars to each person involved." She also asked him to find 2 people to pose as kidnappers and go to the Cornhill apartment to tie up both her and her husband. Their task was to threaten her husband into handing over the 200,000 Hong Kong dollars, while she played along and gave him sleeping pills. February 21, 1988, one day before the incident, Mazan hired 2 construction workers, Liang Zhang and Shi Jiming. The 3 men pretended to be robbers as planned and went to apartment 312. They tied Phuong to the bed in the bedroom, covering his mouth and eyes with tape, then threatened him to hand over the 200,000 Hong Kong dollars. Phuong firmly refused, with no other choice. The 3 men left after warning him, "You'd better stop playing around with women." After they departed, only the couple remained in the house. Early the next morning, February 22, 1988, Gigi called her younger brother and his accomplices, saying when the 3 men returned to the apartment, they found that Phuong had managed to free himself, but was lying unconscious on the floor. They helped him up, securely tied him again, and placed him back on the bed. Mazan Kwan claimed that, after completing their task, the 3 of them left, and had no knowledge of what happened afterward. When asked why he confessed to the police, Mazan admitted that after reading news reports about Phuong's murder, he decided to come forward to explain his involvement and avoid being in. This point, police realized that Gigi had not been entirely truthful in her confession. It appeared she had withheld details to protect her younger brother. There was even speculation that Mazan Kwan himself could have been the killer. To uncover the full story, police brought Mazan Kwan, Liang Zhang, and Shi Jiming, the 3 accomplices, into the same interrogation room. Then, they brought Gigi in and showed her the 3 men being escorted by officers. Upon seeing them, Gigi immediately took responsibility, saying, "The entire incident is my fault. While I hired them to tie up Phuong, I am the only one who killed him. The others had nothing to do with it." She then gave a full confession. Her account matched Mason's earlier statements. She explained that after the 3 men left the apartment, she prepared a bowl of porridge for her husband. When she tried to feed him by the bed, she discovered that he had freed himself. Furious that her plan had failed, Phuong grabbed the bowl from her hands and threw it at her, while shouting angrily in response. Gigi grabbed a large hammer and struck him forcefully, killing him instantly. Following her arrest, Gigi was sent to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. The psychiatrist diagnosed her with paranoid delusions and schizophrenia conditions. she had likely suffered from for over 25 years. Individuals with these disorders often feel persecuted, and it was possible that she acted preemptively to protect herself. Believing killing her husband was the only way to ensure her safety, the trial began on September 29, 1988. 6 months after the incident, at Hong Kong's High Court, 7 jurors participated. Gigi faced charges of murder, unlawful detention, and preventing the lawful burial of a body. The 3 accomplices were charged only with unlawful detention during the trial. All 3 accomplices admitted to their involvement. However, Gigi retracted her earlier confession and pleaded not guilty. The defense presented a handwritten letter from Gigi as evidence in it. She claimed Phuong intended to kill her and that he pampered his mistress, leaving her terrified. Her mental health conditions made her prone to hallucinations and false memories she believed were real. As a result, the defense argued that Gigi's earlier confession was unreliable, and the description of the murder she provided was meaningless. Additionally, the police had failed to recover any physical evidence of Phuong's death, such as hair, bones, or body parts, based on the letter and Gigi's mental state. The judge concluded that at the time of the incident, she was not of sound mind and may have been unable to fully control her actions. Therefore, the possibility that she acted in self-defense could not be ruled out after a week-long trial. On October 4, 1988, the jury reached a verdict by majority vote. 5 jurors found Gigi not guilty of murder, while 2 disagreed, since only a majority was required for a guilty verdict, but a unanimous decision was needed for acquittal. The jury's decision resulted in a manslaughter conviction. Considering her long-term mental illness, the court ruled that Gigi be detained indefinitely at Shaolin Psychiatric Treatment Center, a high-security psychiatric facility in Hong Kong operated by the Correctional Services Department. The center provides psychiatric treatment, assessment, and psychological services for inmates awaiting trial or detention. 3 days later, on October 7, 1988, the other 3 defendants, Mason Quan, Liang Zhang, and Shi Jiming, were convicted of unlawful detention. They were sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by 2 years of probation. The judge described the case as highly unusual and a tragic family matter. He noted that Gigi had sought the help of the 3 men because she could no longer endure her husband's infidelity and abuse. However, the accomplices only tied up Phuong and staged a fake robbery. Without carrying weapons or committing further violence, they were not professional criminals and were unlikely to reoffend. The 3 accomplices were given lenient sentences and detained by the police for only 2.5 months. Their sentences were approved, and they were granted probation, allowing for their immediate release in court. With that, the case was officially closed. Mai spent the next 7 years receiving treatment in a psychiatric hospital. Eventually, her psychiatrist determined that she had fully recovered and was fit for release, leading to her discharge at the end of 1995. This case became one of the top 10 most mysterious cases in Hong Kong, and marked the first time in the city's history that a defendant was convicted without the victim's body ever being found. The family's story was described by the media, the public, and superstitious individuals alike as one of the most haunted apartments in Hong Kong. 2 years after the incident, the apartment was sold to an investor for over $1,100,000 Hong Kong dollars. The investor quickly listed it for resale, hoping to turn a profit. But no buyers were willing to take over the property. It was subsequently rented mainly to foreign tenants. Attempts to auction the apartment in 1990 and again in 2000 were unsuccessful. The real estate values of neighboring units in the same building were negatively affected by the infamous case. Parts of the story were adapted into films and books, including the 1992 TV drama Hong Kong Criminal. Produced by Asia Television. Over time, the case gradually faded from public memory after her release. Mai disappeared, and her whereabouts remain unknown. Any further details of the case likely rest solely with her, as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Scared True Crime Stories. These tales remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of remaining vigilant, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.